Hey guys, Henning and Morten from Flip Normals here. In this video, we're going to be talking about some of the systemic issues of VFX. There are a lot of issues here and they're causing a lot of real world problems with artists' health. A lot of the problems here are relating to really a lot of overtime. Artists really feel that they have to push a lot of overtime in order to not be fired.
Yeah, I think a lot of it stems from this fear when you're in this industry. You know, we're in a creative industry and everyone is very passionate about their work and passionate about the field and everything it sort of entails, right? So it oftentimes become a very personal thing to us. I think what a lot of artists have to realize is that in the end, as much as you love it, whether it's VFX, animation, or games, that it is just a job. And you know, that's totally okay. It can be a job that you love and that you're happy about. It's not like a job that you dread going into work every day. Like, you are truly passionate about it, but you also have to consider the fact that it is a job. And when something is a job, compared to a passion that you do, you know, hobby-wise on the side, there are certain restrictions that you should put on yourself in order to protect yourself.
So why do we have issues in the first place in VFX? That is a tricky question, and we won't get too deep into this because a lot of this is revolving when it comes to like the specific contracts between the VFX studios and the actual film studios like Disney and Warner Brothers and all that. But there are a few key elements here. One of them is that there's a lot of competition in this field. Now, competition is not unique to VFX. A lot of all industries have that. But the margins in VFX are razor thin when it comes to the actual profits. It's a field where, in terms of startup costs, in order to start a full VFX studio, that's expensive. But in order to start a small studio which you can grow, it's not that expensive compared to it. You can start with a computer in your bedroom and you can link it together using Dropbox and work from home solutions and all that. So the startup costs aren't really that big compared to like a full-on like construction company where you have to buy excavators and all of that. And then there is a lot of passion in this field as well, and that's awesome. I love going around to unis and talking to students and going around to different studios as well and just talking about how much people love being in the field. You know, you might have artists who they got really old and bitter after, you know, working a lot of movies, but they still really like the fact that they're working on cool films. And that means that they will work for free. That means that they will put a lot of hours into projects where they really shouldn't. They treat it, like Morten was saying before, more as like a hobby or like a passion project instead of a job.
Yeah, and I think obviously overtime is something we've touched on before. I don't think we've ever dedicated a longer video to overtime. Have we? We should, which will probably be part of this. But like I mentioned before as well, a lot of that stems from, I think, the insecurity and the fear when it comes to these kinds of jobs. You know, oftentimes contracts are short, 3 to 6 months. The kind of work you'll be doing is, you know, you're unsure of what exactly it entails. And when it comes to like a studio level, they don't even really know what kind of work they have coming in. They have an idea and they will be bidding on shows. But oftentimes, the reason contracts are the way they're structured is because of the uncertainty that comes from a high level. You know, like the main studio, let's say Lionsgate or whatever wants to produce something. They'll contact like a sister studio probably, which will contact someone like Framestore. And then they'll be in like a bidding thing and they will say, okay, this is going to take this many hours and this is going to take this many hours. And once you get into that territory, it becomes competitive between the studios. Lionsgate is probably going to reach out to MPC, maybe Weta, and see where can they get the best deal. So even at a high level, it becomes competitive. And obviously that trickles down to the artists as well, because that's kind of the industry that it fosters.
Overtime is, I can't say this enough, is a huge issue in this field. And it's a tricky one. Like Morten is saying here, there's a lot of competition in the field. But that's not the whole story. We've been talking a little bit about this before, where, you really should be careful about blaming artists, because like we're saying, this is a systemic issue. One of the main issues behind overtime, maybe half of all the overtime I've ever seen in a studio, maybe more than that, is due to artists just working after hours. They're not even doing like unpaid overtime. They're doing free labor. Nobody asked them to stay there and do the extra shot or do the extra model, really refine it. They did it because they love the job, which is awesome. But a huge problem that, like a second order effect of all this, is that now the bids are all crazy. And the bid is basically how many hours does it take to do a show, to do a film. You might have, maybe it's 1,000 senior hours, it's a 500 mid-level artists, and like 2,000 junior hours. And they have to know this. When you're bidding a show, you have to know exactly how many hours this takes. So if you have, well, this show took 4,000 hours to do, well, in reality, it took 6,000 hours to do. And that, one of the reasons they don't have accurate numbers on that is because they legit don't know. Now, I'm not saying the studios aren't at fault for underbidding as well. They clearly are. But we had this when I was at NPC, where there was talks of like unionizing and all that, because there were some legit issues there. But one of the things the coordinators and the producers kept telling us was that, look, we're not saying there aren't issues, but you also aren't logging your hours. We don't know how many hours you worked on anything here. And of course they can go down into the offices at like at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and they can see that people are still there. But that's no data. That's like anecdotal. You need to know how many hours a specific task took.
Yeah, I'd be curious actually if the majority of the VFX houses actually know like how long a task takes. Let's say you need to create a creature. Are they fully aware of the scale of what it takes to actually create hour-wise? Or do they have a guesstimate based on, okay, we have these hours here and people will work this percentage, over time. So we could probably get away with only bidding this. I think one of the biggest issues with this in terms of working overtime is how you not only devalue yourself, because you're literally taking away like hours of your life, giving it away for free and not getting paid, devaluing yourself, but you're also devaluing your fellow artists and everyone else in the production, because now you're giving an inaccurate representation of how long a task takes. And by you doing that, and I mean you, me, everyone, you sort of set the bar differently for what's expected hour-wise when you create a task. Let's say you wanted to do a full creature, like Godzilla, I don't know, random creature. And let's say we bid 1,000 hours, like 1,000 artist hours for everything, for modeling, texturing, simming, rigging, whatever it is. If you put in an additional 20%, was that 200 hours? 200 hours extra, those 200 hours aren't getting logged. And now you're screwing everyone in the department over as well, because maybe some will work overtime, maybe some won't. But the people who don't work overtime, now it sort of becomes expected that they have to work overtime as well.
Yeah, now suddenly Morten is sitting there and is doing his 8 hours a day and is doing a great job with that. But because I've spent 10 hours on the tasks, the producers are like, why aren't you done with it? Well, because it needs 2 hours more. Yeah, but the last artist was able to do it in 8 hours as well. But he wasn't, or he or she wasn't able to do it because it took so much longer. So the moment I'm doing free labor, like if it's unpaid overtime, that's problematic. But if it's free labor, which is not logged, Morten has to explain to his dog
why I'm home late,
why you're home late, why the dinner is cold.
I think a lot of it also stems from like let's call it the golden age of animation and visual effects. It was a small industry with a few very passionate people that didn't know what they were doing whatsoever. They were just like, okay, we can do something with vertices now, and okay, we can throw a ray of light at it. Cool. So they were crunching to get things finished because it was a new and exciting field. But I think sort of a leftover of that time is that it's been overly romanticized. How there's like, oh yeah, we got to work overtime. It's a team effort. But it's like the reality is you make it less of a team effort because you work overtime. You take the time away or like the expected time. You're not really meeting that anymore. That's why I think it's such a big problem, why it screws over not just you, but other artists and the departments as well.
In the beginning, when you're starting off in a studio, you really want to prove yourself. You come from you come from a life where you've been looking up to artists for a long time. Maybe it was your childhood dream to work in movies. Like I wanted to do that for like 10 years before I went into movies. It was like an awesome thing. Finally, you're able to make your mark. So you want to do the best damn thing you can, but it's not a solo sport. Cannot stress that enough. This is 100% a team effort. This is, it's going to sound a little cynical, but you are a tiny cog in a big machine, and it's a well-oiled machine, and it's a machine which produces amazing results, but there is no room for ego in this whatsoever.
Yeah. No, not at all. It's interesting, like with the when it comes to overtime, because over the years, I've never worked a single hour of overtime. And I'm not saying that as like some sort of humble brag or anything, but that's because I was very clear from the beginning what I wanted to do with my time in and out of the studio. So I had, Flip Normals on the side, had another company on the side that I was doing. And Flip Normals in particular was, that was our passion project. That's what we went home and spent our hours on at night. So I was very clear, when at 6, 7 o'clock, whatever it is, I'm done, I'm out of here. But that doesn't mean that I haven't been asked to work overtime. This has happened many times. But every single time I've said, no, sorry, I can't do that. I don't have time, whatever it is. Any excuse is basically valid. Just saying no is a valid excuse because you shouldn't be expected to put in hours and work for free. Now, where I think it becomes a bit of an issue is with the leads and the supervisors when they expect you to. And you kind of get the side eye for not doing it. So I think there's partly a responsibility on the higher ups there. Let's say they're doing the bids for the shows. You can't always expect someone as a supervisor or whoever's doing the bidding for the show. We're probably like the whoever is responsible for one department, let's say modeling or something. You would have a head of that who would bid the show for the modeling part. It's also up to them to be in discussion with the supervisors and the leads to figure out what's realistic. So maybe there's pressure on from the studio or whatever, and they say, okay, you have 500 hours, not 1,000 hours for this creature, make it work. And they go like, no, we can't do that. Too bad, make it work. Okay, they go down, they talk to their supervisors and their leads, and they're like, sorry, we only have 500 hours, not 1,000 hours. You talk to your artists. And at that point, I think it's up to the leads and the supervisors to be like, that's shitty. I will ask my artists, not in a sort of expecting way. I don't want to, they shouldn't expect, or I can't expect them to come in. If they really want to, I think they should present it in an apologetic way where it's like, I'm really sorry I have to ask this for you. Bad planning, blah, blah, blah. Can you come in on a Saturday? The artist says no. They say, great, don't worry about it. There shouldn't be any guilt tripping. There shouldn't be any like second rounds of asking like, are you sure you can't come in? It should just be a definitive answer. No means no in this situation.
Yeah, I think it's also important when it comes to it. If it takes 1,000 hours and you're given 500 hours, then, well, if you're being given 500 hours, it's going to look like 500 hours. Yeah. Like I had this happen before in VFX, where I had a great supervisor I worked with. And he was saying that, you've been given 1 day for this task. If you can do it in 1 day, awesome. If you can't, I know it's a 3-day task, just deliver what you could deliver. Yeah. And it will just cause the chaos it causes. But that is the only way they will be able to teach like the management the lesson why you cannot do this. Like it is like the whole you can't have a baby in 4 months by having like 2 moms. You just need to take it. Will just take as much time as this takes.
That one kind of had to sink in. I was like,
I had a supervisor who was talking about that. Like, can't we just have a baby in 1 month if we have 9 moms hired? Like, no, you cannot do that. You will get the end result will just be what it is. Then certain things just take a certain amount of time. Yeah. Like if I'm being given like 1,000 hours to, or if it takes 1,000 hours to do a creature, and I'm given 500, it's gonna be a subpar creature. It's not gonna look the way they expect it to. Which means in this case, they're gonna have to go back and redo it afterwards. You always have enough time to redo it, but you never have time to do it properly the first time.
Yeah, I remember that from we're working on Pacific Rim 2, and very early on in the process, we were talking about the anatomy of the creatures. And the kaiju I was working on at the time, I brought up some concerns. I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus or anything, but I brought up some concerns with the anatomy. I was telling the art team and everyone connected to it that I foresee some issues with rigging and simming further down the line because it's not anatomically viable. It doesn't matter that it's an alien creature. This just doesn't work. And they're like, don't worry about it. It's an alien.
Famous last words.
Yeah. And guess what? 4 months later, you go back to the drawing board and they're like, oh, man, it's just this anatomy. It doesn't work. I think we had a new guy come in, a new supervisor or something. And he was like, this is shit. I was like, yeah, I totally agree. Do you want to see my notes? I already have them prepared from 4 months ago. And, we ended up, instead of correcting it at that point, which would have taken a couple days, we wasted weeks of artist time because we had to redo rigging, retopology, UVs. Bad planning and not sort of looking ahead.
I'm not sure exactly what the moral of this story is.
That was just a tangent.
But I like it.
Yeah, I think it comes down to planning.
Yeah.
Let's segue into planning, because planning on this kind of level, or whether it's a high level thing, when the studios are doing their bidding, it's the same thing, right? If the studio doesn't plan properly, you're not gonna have enough time. And I think that's what happens consistently. There's like two possibilities. Either they're incompetent at planning, or they're willingly underbidding to win the show, right? And if they're willingly underbidding, okay, there's nothing you can do about that. Then you just have to, in either case, you have to say no to work overtime. But in the other case, where they're just bad at planning, they don't actually know how long it takes, that is something I think can be fixed by consistently not working overtime and giving them a real picture of how long it actually takes for, let's say, to create a creature from start to finish.
What I think is also incredibly important is to talk like specifically about the responsibility of an artist. Like, how can you change as an artist? Obviously, a lot of things here is down to management. You cannot change like the contract length yourself. But there are just some ground facts. But one of the ways which would really help me was, like Morten was alluding to before, is consider it a job. Like, it is, no matter how you turn it, it is a job where you work for money, and you're delivering something else to be a profitable product. I think it really helps in this regard to simplify it down and take away like the art part of it. Take away the fact that you're working in ZBrush or Nuke, or you're doing something colorful and you're making explosions. Consider it like you're a doctor or something like that. You would never be asked just to like do doctoring in your spare time to improve. That would be insane. If you were to ask as an accountant, so what kind of accounting have you done in your spare time? Can you show me your spreadsheets? You'll be like, what are you talking about? It's I do accounting at work and I get paid for it. I think it should be 100% acceptable to do the same in VFX as well. To see this as a viable career path, as a way to make money. Now, you should still be passionate about your job, and there is a reason you're tracked in this in the first place. If you only want the money, you should probably go into something like banking or cryptocurrency mining. You do you.
Yeah, don't do VFX for the money.
No, don't do that. But that said, it is still a job. And in that job, you have to make money. And, after a few years, you might have, it's not that you get sick or bitter of VFX, but you get different priorities. You want to have a family. You want to see your parents more. There are so many other things than just life or just work in life. Like, once you have your 20th credit, the 21st may not be the most important one. So I think we have to normalize that this is This is a job where it should be 100% acceptable to move company because you want more money. It's anyone who says that money doesn't rule the world, like they haven't lived in a big city like London or Vancouver or one of the other giant cities and lived below what you should make. The company exists to, of course, they also exist to, to make good movies and all that, but they are inherently a business. They're not a non-profit company. So I really think it needs to be normalized that this should be a viable career path where money isn't something you kind of just talk about with your friends outside of, like, in dark whispers or in low whispers, but it's something that is legit talked about. Why are you passionate about working for this company? Well, I've heard you actually pay quite well.
Mm-hmm.
That should be acceptable.
Yeah, it's almost like in an artist position, right, where people expect you to do work because you're passionate about it, and not because you want to get paid. It's 100% legitimate that you want a job because you want to get paid. I mean, that's how the world works. That being said, I think that definitely hiring someone who shows that they're passionate about the field can definitely be an advantage versus, like, let's say you get someone in who just goes like, yeah, I want $50,000 a year. I'll work this and this. Great, good to go. Okay, maybe not the best chemistry.
No.
Right? You want to hear something about them, but expecting them to, this has personally never happened to me. I think I've been very fortunate to work with companies that just haven't cared. Like, they haven't asked those kinds of questions. They were just interested in seeing my portfolio, my history of work and the kind of work that I've produced, right? But I do know that it is something that people are being asked. It should be 100% legitimate to say you don't really work outside of work. But that doesn't mean that you can't. It's still being a hobby, it's still being a passion. You can definitely put in the time, but you just got to be, I guess, straight about your priorities there. What exactly is it that you want to focus on? Because even without developing new skills outside, you can still keep up to date with the industry. Like new software being released. Will I be out of a job as a modeler because we're all switching over to automatic topology? Not going to happen anytime soon, but could. These kinds of things are things you can keep up to date on without actually having to sit down and grind because you believe that is what's going to get you the next job.
But that said, little tangent here, but if you're a student, there's no such thing as overtime. Like, if you were expected to work from like 9 to 3 o'clock and you work later on, that's not overtime. You're not being paid for your work. You will just have to keep pushing it hard and hard and hard every single day as a student, and that's a bit scary. But that's just the reality of it. There is no cap for once you hit 10 hours a day, then you're fine. So, but where this becomes important is when you've been used to working 12-hour days as a student, you have to be able to put the brakes on the moment you start in the field. This is a really common issue I see. People are used to working insane hours to get into the studio, and they just keep doing the same. Where, we worked with people before who's done that. They kept on working like first year in VFX, and they burnt themselves out like crazy.
Yeah, I think it's important to have that distinction between once you're a professional and when you were a student, because as a student, if you just do the schoolwork, nothing more, most likely you're not going to be the one who gets the job because you just need to put in the hours, whatever that is, hour wise. Like, I don't know, it depends on you as an artist how fast you develop, but it is something that you should consider. Like, now, but bringing that, let's call it bad habit, into VFX is something you shouldn't do. That's where you have to start. Obviously, it's going to be hard from the get-go to just like, okay, no more work. But it's something that takes time. You get used to it, and then you start treating it more and more like a job.
The beauty of getting a job is that you can now, maybe for the first time in many years, you can actually start to do other things than just working.
Have a hobby that's not 3D.
Yeah, I should get that.
Yeah, me too.
But I've seen that a lot now where I see students who after the year after they graduate, they're just too burnt out to actually do 3D in their spare time after work. But they still feel that they have to put in the extra hours at the studio because they're just really afraid of where it can go.
I mean, you also have to consider when you're a student and you're working these crazy hours. Let's say you work 12, 14 hours a day, whatever. You still have to take care of your body.
Yes.
You still have to take breaks. You still have to look away from the screen, like go for a walk, eat properly, do some exercise. Like you can't just put your life completely on hold just because you have to put in the effort. Because then once you enter the industry, your body's going to be messed up. And you're going to have like carpal tunnel syndrome and like a slip disc or whatever. So there is definitely that aspect to consider as well.
Yeah, both Mark and I are completely destroyed in terms of that.
Yay!
Working hard was, like we got pretty fast into VFX, but it had a real toll on both our bodies.
Yeah, I have chronic back pain.
Yeah, I have issues with my arms and shoulders, and I wasn't sure in first year of university. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to finish first year of university, just because of that. So, but that's like a thing in general. Like that's not just as a student. You have to take care of yourself throughout. That's one of the main points about this video, that you will have to take care of your health. And health isn't physical health. Health is mental health. It's just health. It's how you're feeling in your mind and in your body. Like there is some real synergy in that, without sounding too much like a LinkedIn post here. But it is important. And when it comes to being healthy, there are a few warning signs you have to start to look out for. I've heard this once when I was in VFX. We're like a family here. And that makes me gag so hard. Like I have a hard time expressing how uncomfortable the notion of we're like a family here makes me. As far as I know, it's not common to hire and fire family members.
Sometimes.
Sometimes you do.
But not all the time.
And you sure as hell don't negotiate contracts with other families and put them, sell people and you don't have like a brother for a 3-month contract.
No, I think it's an important aspect to consider, because like all of this kind of ties into working overtime, right? And how much spare time do you spend on becoming a better artist or whatever it is. If a studio presents itself as a family, specifically, that there's probably something that should go off in your brain, be like, oh, we always look out for each other and blah blah blah. Sure, your colleagues are your colleagues. They can be friends. They can be kind of like family, but that's your colleagues, not the studio. The studio, unfortunately, primarily cares about its bottom line. It'll definitely do what it can if it's a good studio to also take care of you, provide nice facilities, good working hours, food, whatever it is. But don't for a second, and it can sound bleak, but don't for a second think that if you don't add value to the company, that they will keep you around. Like if they feel they're better served with another artist who can deliver better quality at a faster rate or whatever it is, and they're cheaper than you, once they have new shows coming in, they might reevaluate your contract. So there's definitely that aspect to consider. And then you also have to think about taking care of yourself. Because when these things happen, especially with contracts, because contracts are so short in VFX. Like we mentioned, 3 to 6 months. Sometimes you get a year. I think my longest contract was 6 months.
Yeah, I've had 1 year twice, but my latest contracts were 3 months, and that was as a senior hires at DNEG. Yeah. We were both on 3-month contracts at the end, I think.
Yeah, I remember sort of like the last month or so at DNEG before we left. There was, they were expressing that they were really happy with both of us, and they really wanted to extend our contracts. They just couldn't right now because they were bidding on shows. The problem with that is that no shows were confirmed. So even though they loved apparently working with us, there was nothing they could do at the time. At that point, I think maybe a week before our contract was running out, something like that, we were just like, no, we're out. Don't worry about it. And they did extend people eventually. And I think if we had stayed, we would have been extended anyway. But we wanted to take the jump to Flip Normals at that point, for working full time. But I think in situations like that, you have to look out for yourself. And that means being proactive. First of all, if you have a 3-month contract, I don't know, after a month and a half or so, go to HR, go to your department manager and ask, what is the work situation looking like? Can I expect to be extended? Are you happy with me? Blah, blah, blah. And if they say, oh, we don't know, even if they say, yeah, we love working with you and we can guarantee that you get a contract, don't take that as a guarantee. Start contacting other studios. Reach out to them and say, hey, my contract is finishing at this date. Will you have work available? Just to cover your bases. Because I have seen it so many times. Guarantees from studios about when you can start working or something else. If the shows don't come in, they can't deliver on them. And that's not the studio being evil. That's just because they don't actually have any work coming in. They're missing the work they thought they were going to have. And therefore, they can't extend you.
And this is where there needs to be some kind of symmetry as well. I see this a lot where people are loyal to studios. And not saying that a place which has treated you well, you should just ditch them the first moment you can. There should be some symmetry here. If they've treated you really well, give them the respect they deserve back. But if they're giving you a 3-month contract, like no matter what words they're using, you need to watch what they're doing, not what they're saying. Yeah. And what they're actually doing is they're keeping you on just long enough so you can do the work, but the moment there is any danger, they can get rid of you. So you need to keep this in mind to keep yourself safe. It's not about loyalty. It's literally about can you pay rent? Can you feed your family? Yeah. Can you go on vacation? All these kind of things. So important to watch out for yourself first.
Yeah, and different studios, they have different, obviously different countries as well, have different kind of termination periods. I think at DNEG we had like a 1 week.
Yeah, it was something. Yeah, we were signed a week before we left.
And I think at Framestore I maybe had a month.
I think I had 4 weeks at MPC as well.
Something like that. So it varies, and it probably varies from country to country. This was in the UK. I think just another segue talking about loyalty. I promise you it's relevant. I had a friend of mine who she worked on a film, and she was very late in the process. She was brought over to work on this film. She was a FX artist or something, and they needed some shots before delivery. They brought her over, go to do the job, and she wasn't new to the industry, but she was like fairly new. Junior, had maybe worked for like 6 months or a year or something like that, and she was very much in the mindset of she wanted to prove herself, which I think we all have that. We all want to do obviously the best work that we can do, and we want to make sure that also we're recognized for it, because we are passionate about this and we love what we do. And so there was this one night where she stayed up until like 3, 4, 5 a.m. in the morning working at the studio to finish this shot. And I talked to her the morning after, and she was just like a mess. Like, what are you doing? This is unnecessary and super unhealthy. And she was like, no, I just need to get this shot done because they're expecting it of me. But like, then say no, because this is not good. I mean, you're 2 weeks before the delivery, blah, blah, blah. It can wait. She did it again the following day, 3, 4 a.m., same story. And I believe she was sick for like a week after or something, because she had just put in like 6 working days worth of work in 2 days. And film comes out and she's not even on the credits. And she was destroyed by that. And it was one of those things where, yeah, I kind of feel bad for you, but at the same time, you did this to yourself. It might be the studio pressured you into working overtime, but you do have the ability to say no.
Now, if you are a supervisor or a lead and you pressure your junior 6 months out of school into doing 72 hours in 2 days, then you should get a restraining order against yourself. And as far as I know, that's never happened. I never heard anyone expect that in that regard.
Yeah, or getting fired for not working overtime.
No, not at all.
It's I was once asked by, this was a sneaky one. They did the double on me, where first the production coordinator, she comes in and she's like, hey, Morten, Monday is Easter. I'm like, yes, I am aware. Can you work Monday? I'm like, sorry, no, I can't.
It's Easter.
Yeah, it's Easter. I have to, be a piece of crap on the bed or something. And she's like, oh, okay, fair enough. And she leaves. 5 minutes goes by or whatever. And my supervisor comes in and he's like talking to the other people in the room, blah, blah, blah. And then he sort of casually looks over at me and is like, Mon, you're coming in on Monday, right? I'm like, no, I just told blah, blah, blah that I'm not coming and it's Easter. And he was like, oh, okay. Like almost offended that I didn't want to come in. And I think that was like this sort of, how do you say, like scummiest way I've ever been asked to work overtime, where just one person coming in, okay, obviously they got to know, they'll try again, but a little more forceful. It wasn't so much of a question, like, can you work? It was like, you are coming in, right?
And if you hadn't been in the position that we're in, where, you know, you had flip normals and we're just at the end of, like, we know where we're seriously starting to take over, like, we had 40 weeks at that point. You know, we didn't work Mondays because we did Mondays for YouTube for flip normals. If you hadn't been in that position, you might have just done that.
Yeah.
Which brings us to, how do you act as a leader and supervisor? Now, this is a tricky one, and these of course our opinions on the subject, but what I feel is that as a supervisor, one of your main responsibilities is to make sure that your team are protected. I really feel that you're supposed to be like a leader of your team. Your title might literally be a lead. You're not supposed to be a taskmaster who whips them.
I never thought about that. I've always just like, it's a word, lead. Yeah, but obviously you're leading the team.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's more about that, you know, you're actually helping create synergy in the team and making sure you have like, you know, good team spirit.
Yeah.
For me, all this boils down to the fact that this is not a family, it's like a professional sport. And it's like as a leader or supervisor, you're more like a coach.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to just whip them into shape. You're supposed to inspire them. You attract a lot more talent, and you nurture a lot more talent if you treat them like people. I think that's so important. If again, in the whole thing we talked about before, you begin 500 hours and it's a 1,000-hour job, you should just go, no, my team cannot do this. It's physically impossible to do it.
Yeah, and that's also where, like we talked about before, you have to establish some personal boundaries, professional boundaries. Yeah. And if an artist says no to not working overtime, that should be perfectly acceptable. There shouldn't be any like prying into why or why not can't you work. It's like if they say no, they can't work. Forget about the pressuring, and it should be your job to protect them from overtime. Be apologetic about it, like we talked about. It was like, I'm really sorry to ask you this, but can you come in on a Saturday? If you say no, that's totally fine.
I see this a lot in VFX, where particularly in the UK somehow, where there seems to be this big hierarchy, like almost like you have castes of society, where people seem to assume that if you're a supervisor or a lead or management, then you're above them. Like you're in a different level, a tier. Yeah. And like that's not the case at all. You're just another person, and that person might have a more demanding job than you and more responsibility on your shoulder. But as a human, you are 100% equal. So if somebody has in a contract that, you know, it's an agreed upon contract between a company and a worker, there should be some symmetry there. If you're being asked to do something which goes outside of that, and you tell them no, that should be respected, because you do not know what the person is going through in their personal life. Could be breakup, death of a family member. It could be whatever.
Could be you just want to sleep.
Could be you just want to sleep. Like it literally doesn't matter. Like if you just want to sleep, or if you had like something serious happen in your life, it's not like the supervisor is not above you in life. He has no authority over that. He can tell you what to do, like within the working window, but as a human, he has no authority over you.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you have to consider as well, especially for supervisors, in some companies, some places, a supervisor's salary is there's a buffer in there where they have added overtime pay. You know, they don't get paid for overtime, but they get paid more because they are expected to work overtime. And fair enough, if that's the deal that they have made, they get to work overtime because they're actually getting paid more for it. Now, I don't think that's the best solution. I think you should be paid for the hours extra you put in. Ultimately, this is probably a strategic move from the studios because they know and expect from their supervisors to work more overtime. So they know they would have to pay them even more if they paid per hour, obviously. But that is one of those things that's going to be really hard to change. I think the only thing that we can do is encourage artists, really, you know, from a low level, to start saying no and have some more self-respect, not just for you, but also consider your fellow artists, what you saying yes to overtime does to them and to the rest of the team.
Yeah, so I mean, to sum all this up, like as an artist, you have to log your hours. There is no way around that. Even if you were to give them free labor, don't recommend that. I highly recommend against that. But if you do work after hours, you have to log it full stop.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you are screwing over everyone else, and Morten can't see his dog.
So the dog that I still don't have.
Yeah.
Soon though.
The days as a student, they're over. You're not a student anymore. You were driving at 100 kilometers an hour. Now you're a professional, and you should treat the job as a job. No, you shouldn't treat it just as like it's you work in a grocery store with like no upwards mobility, because there's a lot of upwards mobility in it. You should treat it as like a career. You should treat it as like a career path, but don't burn yourself out like crazy. Respect yourself, take care of your health, and realize that your actions, they affect yourself and people in the industry. One person of a 2,000 person company might not be a huge ripple, but 2,000 people out of a 2,000 person company, consistent behavior over a long time, that sends ripple through the industry. There's a reason why certain companies have a great reputation and other studios don't. It's not just because they have like free pizza on Fridays or something. It's because of their consistent behavior with all their employees, or the majority of their employees.
Yeah, and I think it's important again to think about that. The studio doesn't owe you anything. Like, they don't owe you a job. I mean, obviously, if you've worked, they owe you money. But other than that, you shouldn't expect loyalty from them, just as they shouldn't expect loyalty for you or from you. You have to look out for yourself, but be respectful. You know, there's no reason to go around being a douchebag about it. It's like, you can still be respectful. You can still love your company that you work for and love the work, but you just have to take care of yourself.
And then as a supervisor or lead, or a person who's a manager, you need to make sure that you properly lead the team. You make sure that the people who work under you, they feel a part of your team, and they have the resources they need in order to do their job, and that they're protected from like the office politics of it, and that the hours it takes to do the job, those are the hours they take. So we're really interested in hearing your opinions about this as well. You know, we obviously have our own personal experience. It would be really interesting to hearing. You know, obviously we were based in London before, and that's our bias.
Yeah.
So we'd love to hear people from, you know, different companies and different parts of the world. What has your experience been like? What systematic issues have you seen in VFX? And another one, which is maybe a little for another video, should you unionize?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's not so much what we're talking about here.
No.
Like a small bit of unionization. But I would be curious to hear also some of the bad experience that people have had. Like, have you directly been fired because you said no to working overtime? It never happened to me, and it's never happened to anyone I know. But it could totally happen. So, yeah. Reach out to us in the comments and tell us your experiences. We would love to hear them.
And thank you so much for watching, and click the little notification bell to hear more Flip Normal rants about VFX, and click the subscription button to subscribe to us as well.